Good evening. My name is Major Chris Manning. I am assigned to the New York Wing in the Western New York Group, where I'm on staff as an officer who supports three units in Buffalo: NY614, NY615, and NY616. They are all traditional cadet squadrons hosted at public charter schools. Um, this is my level 5 capstone presentation. And what it is answering is hopefully a proposed solution to a problem that I've identified over the years in CAP with regard to access. Um, just a little background, the squadrons that I support, NY614 is a traditional cadet squadron version of the original squadron was NY824, which was a school unit, 800 series school unit. Once the charter school closed, we had, how can I say, that charter had to be deactivated as a result of the school closing, and then NY614 was stood up to ensure that those cadets and senior members still had a unit, despite the fact that the school was gone. And then it became a traditional unit that was hosted at a different school, and it still stands. And then two other squadrons were born from that. It was a rather large unit, and cadet leaders from the original squadron had gone on to two different schools, and we stood up two squadrons there. They're all pretty large sized squadrons, successful in their own right with their own commanders, their own structures, their own independence, operating under the Western New York Group. So when I say my units, I'm saying it in the same loving way one might say my school or my state, my country. I love these units. I do a great deal of spend a great deal of my time rather supporting them, and this from that this research was born and this study was born. So, expanding access to the Silver Patrol, proposing a national model of school-hosted traditional units. So, in the abstract, I'm really just kind of laying out exactly what the paper was on. Excuse me. And it just really goes on. CAP has a limit on its structures, and it limits urban access. And it's not in a sense CAP's structure in the regulation that limits urban access, just how it kind of fell over the years, particularly here in the Northeast region. In New Jersey, New York, not a problem. Very massive urban centers, great representation. But outside of those mega city centers, particularly out here in Western New York, you're not going to find a very wide representation of urban city cadets in the units. And I believe an answer to that would be school-hosted traditional units. It improves access, sustainability, and growth, and it just really, the city really takes to it. And this is the model that I am proposing that is eventually adopted as a model for units for leaders to look at as an option for schools, for students, for families in the urban center. CAP varies by region. My first unit in Silver Patrol was in Montana. My second unit was in Washington, D.C. And of course, my third is here in New York after a long stint overseas. So I've seen CAP in Montana where we had a lot of rural cadets and programs. I've seen it in D.C. Again, another massive urban program there. And here in Western New York is kind of a combination of both. Urban areas face their own barriers, so do rural areas. And a great deal of CAP units do really well in the suburbs. The strategic plan that we currently have by our national leadership targets growth and capacity in youth development and STEM, and this, I believe, is aligned to that strategic plan. So the problem statement that I have for my paper is this: the Silver Patrol lacks scalable, affordable, or sustainable models for expanding traditional cadet squadrons into urban school environments. The problem restricts access to, impacts sustainability of cadet units in urban communities, especially in the Northeast region. geographic and transport limitations, and facility use constraints limit access to traditional cadet units and the market share for youth program offerings in aerospace STEM education. This problem further restricts CAP's capacity to expand its area of service and competitive position within the youth development and aerospace education programs in accordance with, again, CAP's strategic plan for 2024 to 2026. And when I say competitive, I'm talking about um, programs such as Junior ROTC, other the Sea Cadets programs that you will find, particularly Air Force Junior ROTC or other service Junior ROTCs. So I believe having this model, a traditional unit hosted in a school, could potentially make it more of a competitive um, program. Background, traditional units rely on travel, right? You're a suburban unit. The meetings in the evening, parents need to get their cadets to the meetings and back, or cadets who are old enough drive themselves to the unit and back. Maybe the squadron might have a van that might help with that, but for the most part, it's on you to get to the meeting, right? Urban, in the urban center, a great deal, especially here in Buffalo, that's a barrier. The barriers include distance and transport because you can live pretty far away and it can take a very long time to get to where you need to go. And the weather makes it even more difficult, particularly in the winter, especially up here. These are barriers if we relied on them. And a great deal of people in certain zip codes don't have transportation options of their own. And cadets are on the young side to be getting on the metro buses to go back and forth from units. Um, and then there's the competition with school-based programs, right? Because there's other programs that um, are there, again, junior ROTC programs that are there as an option uh, for parents. So I can go back to that. Well, I can't go backwards. Um, so the program analysis was really about a challenge. It's structural, not programmatic. The access requires transportation, as I talked about, and urban cadets are dependent on school-based programming for participation opportunities. That's why you'll find a great deal of the students who are participating in sports, things of that nature, are all through the school because they're heavily dependent on those things that are provided through school support. Really, CAP lacks standardized agreements with schools to ensure stable long-term unit placement other than the in-schools program, the 800 series, which of course I'm going to talk about. Um, let's see, alternative solutions, right? There are alternatives. We can maintain what we have, right? Currently you have traditional units and you have school-based units, right? That's the status quo. That's an option, and you have plenty of school traditional units that are hosted in schools under this model. Keeping this as obviously an alternative that many people are, including the units that I support, fall under. Then we can either expand. Another option is just expand the 800 series units. So as opposed to anything I'm talking about here, just continue under the same model and just expand those models throughout schools, which is another option. And then, of course, the recommendation I have are school-hosted traditional units. So school-based are 800 series units that are tied to the school, MOUs between the school and the squadron. Typically, a great deal of times, only students from that school are part of the unit. Vast majority of staff are people from that school. Again, the school being successful and being there means the unit is there. Anything should happen to the school, unit has an issue, right? And I experienced that myself. But a traditional unit, which could be anywhere, a number of places, fire stations, churches, community centers, that nature. If something should happen to the school or access to the school should become an issue, then the unit can pick up and go to a community center or whichever they find their new host, and they can continue operating. So they have that freedom, flexibility of traditional unit, but they happen to be hosted in the school with all the resources you typically only find in school-based units. So, but actually creating a model for this that is in the regulations and how can I say, motivated and put out there, I think is what I'm recommending here. A nationwide traditional unit model is what I'm recommending. CAP's organizational framework 30-1. It leverages, I preserve CAPS regulation in 30-1, but leverage school partnerships. The model improves accessibility, sustainability, and scalability, and on a national level. And that's the thing. So how do we preserve the framework that we see in 30-1, and how do we then leverage school partnerships? I believe this is the answer. Key elements. There's a lot that has to go into it. You have transportation coordination through school districts and community partners. So you have nonprofits. In our case, we have a nonprofit organization that provides transportation for our cadets to and from meetings and events. In some cases, some units partner with districts to do so, who have, again, their own apparatuses for transportation. Access to education and after school grant funding. So you can partner with, as we're going to discuss, partnering with the school to write grants. The school can write its own grants to support its programming. So if it's hosting the unit on its campus and the unit's meeting after school, then they can raise money through after school programming if they want it, right? And they have an abundance of access to their own grants. In some cases, philanthropists and nonprofits will look at grants requested from a school with as a grant that they're more interested in as compared to a CAP squadron maybe at times, right? Formalized facility agreements with year-round contingency planning, right? And what that is you have to really think about the fact that a lot of schools use their summer times to deep clean, do construction inside the building. So your CAP squad is running all throughout the year. So you got to think about perhaps there's going to be times in the summer you're going to have to move to a different location on the campus in order for them to do the work they need to do. Or you might have to have an alternative location for a couple of weeks while they do the work. But I've not had that situation. I've been able to access these school campuses all throughout the year, and we have year-round programming. So even when the school's on breaks, with the access that we have, we're able to still access the campus, do what we have to do, so long as we're abiding by their rules. There has to be some policy alignment, and we're now there are some issues we're working through. You have the Crown Act, which is a federal law that has to do with discrimination with hair, and then you have 39-1 with their strict grooming standards. And there's some cases there are some opinions and legal positions on whether or not, as a program that's operated on a school campus in coordination with the school, is allowed to discriminate based on hair, even though the organization itself has clear grooming standards adopted from AFI 362903 into 39-1. So there's some policy discussions and explanations that have to be said constantly. And there's just, it's on that squadron commander and that school leader to have an understanding of what exists, what's the best for the cadet, what's going to ensure the cadet gets the most out of the program, and just being careful in that way and presenting it so that it's shown as again, an amazing program that's all about youth development and not a discriminatory program, rather. And then there's the integration. You can integrate with the school, the personnel, reduce administrative burden. So that's, you have a lot of really talented people right at your fingertips, right? So we have personnel officers in our squadrons who are also front desk clerks inside the school. They have access to all the parents, all the students. They know how to use these computer systems. So, all you got to do is you recruit them, you train them, they come to meetings, and you get them into the personnel officer track. You train them on these services, and suddenly you have a person who's a master at all the personnel processes. Aerospace education officers, again, you have teachers everywhere in the STEM area who are willing to jump in. You got logistics and operations people. You have all type of professionals that work inside of a school for recruitment on the senior member side. Parents are, again, you have a lot of parents who are really involved in a school. You can get those same parents to join into your program, your school program, especially if their cadet is a student, right? So school integration is another way to ensure sustainability of the program and reduce the burden, because you have a lot more adults, talented adults, who are very, very passionate. Those crossing guards and people out there who are looking out for the kids. Maybe they want to join CAP and become your safety officer. These are all people who, and I'm constantly interacting with these people and telling them exactly what the program is. They see me in my uniform, and we do a great deal of recruitment from school staff. Okay. So deliverable, the deliverable proposed here for the national implementation will be a national implementation guide for school-hosted traditional units to help units, community members who are seeking this option design the unit to where it's going to work out, it's going to be sustainable. MOU templates. The MOU will look a little different from the one that's used for 800 series, but consists of some similar language. Transportation frameworks, talking through what options are available, talking through what options are available if you're using the district or schools transportation option, or if you're seeking transportation option through nonprofit. You know, they're nonprofit organizations that have their own buses, their own vans. There are many options there, and we can discuss, you know, those transportation frameworks and provide those options. Facility agreements, those are going to look different again from the ones that you typically see. You know, it's really discussing access and the required training for access, right? So, you know, who's going to access the facility, what type of clearance you need in New York State. You're going to get that New York State Teach fingerprint background check, just like anyone else who accesses the campus. So we go through our background checks in CAP. You have to go through a whole another series of background checks and check every box and dot every I, cross every T that a teacher's aide, a teacher, a bus driver, a custodian, anyone who has to operate inside of a school building has to go through. All the staff involved in your Civil Patrol Cadet Squadron have to do the exact same thing. So understanding those policies and guidelines and putting that inside the facility agreements, they really appreciate that. Funding guidance, helping traditional units hosted in schools understand the different options. Now you have all the options to raise your funds as a traditional Civil Patrol unit, but you also can partner with the school to make sure that the school themselves can raise funds, and maybe the school would like to raise funds for uniform items for their students. Maybe the school wants to raise, they do it all the time for their sports teams, right? They raise money for uniforms. Maybe they want to, you know, raise money for Coyote Brown boots for the incoming cadets in the fall, right? So there are different options out there when you have uh, multiple organizations looking to raise funds for your cause, and there's many different ways to do that. And to follow, make sure you're following the state and federal guidelines. But they're all separate entities, but they themselves can raise money for a cause that they feel is close to them. And if you're on their campus, they see you putting up their flag, taking down their flag. Your cadets are volunteering for their events, helping them set up and tear down. Your cadets are setting the right example for the other students, and they say, "Hey, we want to do something for you guys." It's always an amazing thing, and you're right there invisible. And parents and schools oftentimes step up. Um, and then establishing the proposed deliverables, establishing that standardized framework for the national implementation. So the cost, there's a very low infrastructure cost due to the shared school facility. So you know you're buying decorations to put up, but you know you're not paying any rent, right? I currently support and work with three different units that are in three different schools, and in each school we have a space depth for CAP. In one school for NY614, they're at Reach Academy. Reach Academy has two buildings, a middle school and an elementary school. Uh, Most of our cadets obviously are from the middle school and cadets who are already in the squadron who have graduated but they're still in the squadron. But our CAP room is in the elementary school on the second floor. We have our own area, we have our own access, and we do our program there. No problems. Decorations are up and everything. You know, it's their space. It really works out great. NY615 is hosted at Maritime Charter School. Maritime has a high school and a middle school. There we have our own space over in the high school on the bottom floor. A massive space, right? Multiple areas and rooms, and that squadron NY615 has all that space there. Decorating and everything. There's no cost for facilities, right? And finally, NY616 is on Buffalo Academy of Sciences campus. They have a huge campus. They actually have a college campus that they purchased, and we have a nice area there on their high school campus, right? And they have we have cadets in the unit from their middle school and their high school. So you know there's low infrastructure costs because you have the shared facility of the school, and these squadrons are examples of where you can take advantage of that, be really good tenants, take care of the facility. Our cadets know to help take care of the facility, be good tenants, as long as they're being good hosts and follow the rules, right? It definitely helps on that cost level when it comes to the Civil Patrol units. Um, there's some risk there. There's scheduling conflicts, right? There you have to make sure that you understand when the units are having their big schools are having their big events, not to schedule a unit event there. In each unit, we use the school's auditoriums for the promotion and award ceremonies at the end of the month. We make sure that we check the calendar to make sure that there's no conflict, so that we don't cause any scheduling conflicts. If there's a big game, this is not the time that we're practicing major drill in the parking lot, because the parking lot's going to be full. So being aware of what's going on in the school is very important, right? You're not going to be having students going. It's obviously their prerogative, but you're not planning on AM leadership schools or leadership academies at the same time they're doing their big exams. You want the school to know that you're conscious of it, right? Now, that doesn't dictate what you do in Civil Air Patrol. Obviously, the parents and the cadets decide if they want to do both at the same time. But if, as a squadron, you're scheduling things at the same time as their big exams, school's going to think you're not paying attention to what's going on in the cadets' lives, right? So, again, you just want to make sure that you're not conflicting with the school life. You're trying to marry that cadet life and that student life at the same time, and them understanding that you know that, right? And also, hey, there's going to be times when your cadet is on the track team. How and then is that going to impact their ability to come to the meeting? What are you doing about that, right? So these are all things that you're trying to coordinate with the school to make sure that they know that that schedule matters to you. Um, we talked about policy misalignment, right? The grooming standards versus 39-1, and having those conversations and make sure you're able to articulate that, excuse me, to parents and schools alike. Volunteer adaptation, there's a lot there, right? Normally, teachers are paid stipend to work after school, right? You ask some teachers to come and volunteer and put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and sweat equity into your unit, knowing that it's all a volunteer venture, right? So that's another thing they get over, right? Teachers are exhausted, and now you're asking them to give 2 hours of their time each week. So it's really upon you to let them understand that tenet of volunteer service and what that means, right? And modeling that is really important, right? I model that and I remind them that, hey, this is, I'm volunteering because I really believe in the students. And you really, you have people who are passionate about young people already. And you really lean in on that to say, hey, this is a force multiplier. And guess what? You can have skin in the game. You've seen the student go from where they were in the fall to where they're now, what they are now in the spring. And you've been a part of that because you're in the CAP unit and you're help building them to be the leader they've become, right? So when they get that promotion and teaching them the stage in their polo shirt, they feel great, right? Um, so mitigation, again, have some standardized agreements, how to mitigate some of these risks. Have some agreements, have discussions, make sure you understand what's happening and how to make sure there's no conflicts. Communication is very important, right? Pilot programs. That's really huge, right? So you can, using the model of 614, 615, 616 and how they've been working out, partnerships with nonprofits for transportation, agreements on schools and facilities, and operating within the schools, integrating in the school communities, not being 800 series squadrons, but being hosted on campuses, and definitely taking advantage of those facilities and resources available by being on a school. We actually use and because we're a part of Western New York Group, oftentimes when there is a TLC, when sometimes we just hosted a PAO workshop, when there are workshops that have to be done in the area, we've hosted it at many of our different campuses for the group, and the groups loved it. Clear communication between the CAP squadron and the school partner is very important. These superintendents are people that I talk to constantly. They're a text away. There's not one superintendent over these schools that I operate in that if I were to send a text message, they wouldn't respond. They know we're doing a great thing with the cadets. I know if there are any issues, I can go to them, and they're great with helping us make sure that we have a place to run our program. The nonprofit that supports us has a bus. One of the schools has a very large campus. The bus is parked there because we don't have to pay to put our bus in a rental place or anything. So that works out well. Our van, we have to park it somewhere. We can park it at any of the school campuses. Clear communication on what you need, what your needs are, and so long as they know you're doing a great thing with the cadets, works out really well. If there are any incidents on the school side or the CAP side, having that communication is important, and making sure there's a clear difference between incidents that happen in school and incidents that happen in CAP, and what CAP is regulating and what CAP covers. What is covered by a school field trip and what they're doing outside of CAP, and what's a 60/80 because CAP's involved. All these things have to be very clear to make sure there's a clear line. They're two different organizations, but that integration, that communication is important for the sake of sustaining that program. I'd say phase one will be again pilot. We're looking to hopefully by this fall have all three units get the Quality Cadet Unit Award, right, to show the quality, and they're doing really well towards those aims. Um, so the pilot targeting urban units in Northeast region, establishing school partnerships, which we have, right, and these are pilots for that. Um, Phase two could be expansion, developing a national guidance, or we can start with a regional guidance to expand into additional regions, or again, a regional guidance to expand in additional groups, work with other groups besides Western Europe group to start with their pilot traditional school unit in the urban school, help, be a command mentor to them and help them get their themselves established, work with some nonprofits surrounding, and that could definitely be an option in terms of expansion, starting in the region to see if it applies to the national model. Beautiful thing about New York State is that we have, just like I just read in the commander's intent, he just explained how we have a very, very diverse state. We have very rural and Adirondacks. We have the massive, largest urban center, New York City. We have urban centers all over the state. We have Syracuse. We have Albany. We have Buffalo, where I'm at, we have Rochester, right? We have northern Buffalo. We have northern New York, western New York. We're everywhere, right? From Niagara Falls, which is down the street from where I live, all the way down to Long Island, right? So it's a very diverse place, and I see that implementation here could be. There's places here that we can use as a model to scale in other places in our country. And then phase three is, that standardization, integrate the model into the CAP national framework and publish implementation guide, right? But first we have to, these pilot units that we have here, seeing these work, expand them out, maybe in different parts of the region here, the state here, see if it works in other parts in the region, that we could look at as a national scalable framework. And I'll say again, there are plenty of traditional school units hosted in schools. This is proposing us eventually getting to a point where we standardize that, as there are traditional squadrons that are outside of schools, as the regulation clearly says outside of school. Then there are school units. What about traditional units that are actually hosted in schools? Not really mentioned inside the regulation, and hopefully we, with the success of this, it will be mentioned as a model to take and have some guidance for that. Because right now you're neither fish nor fowl. You're not a 800 series school unit attached to the school, but you're not a school that's out. You're not a unit outside of a school as a traditional community squad. You are a traditional squadron hosted inside of a school. Alignment. This directly supports the strategic plan of 2024 to 2026. There's objectives to improve cadet program accessibility, to strengthen competitive position in youth development, and to increase participation in aerospace and STEM education. These are directly tied to those objectives that were found in the strategic plan. It improves access, it strengthens youth development, and it expands that STEM as we discussed. Okay, in conclusion, the current CAP model is not easily scalable to urban environments due to the structural barriers that I just discussed. The school-based traditional units, school-hosted traditional units provide a scalable, sustainable solution to expand access. And the model strengthens CAP's long-term impact on youth development and aerospace education. Thank you for watching this presentation. Again, this is just the presentation that's complemented by the 9-page capstone paper that I've authored and already submitted. Again, many years ago, I wrote a dissertation, and it was based on the work I was doing, my life's work at that time. This, and very much so, is in that same vein on a very small, much smaller scale, but this is the work I'm currently doing. I spend hours on every single week working and nurturing these units. I believe this has worked as a definite model that has worked for the city of Buffalo. We have hundreds of cadets who are really, this has changed their lives. A lot of adults, this has changed their lives, and this has definitely brought an amazing program to the schools. And I'm proposing this as a model that I believe can definitely impact hundreds of more lives in urban centers across our country. Thank you for paying attention.